Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our Master of Ceremonies for the afternoon, Colonel Jim Smith.
When I left the house today, my wife said, that bald head's not going to cut it today. So if you don't mind, I am going to wear a hat. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Smith, and I'm honored to participate in this ceremony today. It's not often that this old Army guy gets to talk about a Navy admiral, and especially one that did good. We're here today to honor Admiral Husband E. Kimmel. We just finished our annual Christmas parade in Henderson, and the number of people watching, let alone the number of participants in the parade, I think was wonderful. On behalf of the Henderson War Memorial Foundation, I would like to welcome you, our invited guests, and those that have stayed after the Christmas parade to this dedication here on the Henderson riverfront on the majestic Ohio River. There are only a few cities that sit along this river that can put their beautiful riverfront construction on national display. It's also fitting that today's dedication takes place here. This dedication would not have been possible without the work of many individuals and groups. If you take just a moment and look at the back of your program, you see a list of names and a list of sponsors that have made this day possible. Without their support and your donations, this event would not be taking place. Also listed are the Henderson War Memorial Committee members. As you see or talk to any of them or the organizations, please give them a big thank you for all their support and efforts. This is a great setting for what we do today. As people come to visit, we can be proud of what we have here and what we are doing. Just prior to the onset of America's involvement in World War II in 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt sought to unite several service associations into one organization to lift the morale of our military and nourish support on the home front. Those entities were the Salvation Army, the Young Men's Christian Association, the Young Women's Christian Association, the National Catholic Community Services, National Travelers Aid Association, and the National Jewish Welfare Board. They became the United Services Organization, or as we know, the USO. Today, the USO has continued to support our military here and abroad for the decades that they've been in existence. They provide support to our servicemen and women as they perform their most challenging duties around the world. The USO credo is to be always by their side. We have by our side today our USO tent behind you. The tent is staffed by the Ladies Auxiliary from the American Legion Post number 40. Back in my days, we called the ladies donut dollies. So if you get a chance, go visit our donut dollies. Get a hot cup of coffee that they worked so hard since we've had a little malfunction with our coffee maker, but I think we've got some going. Get a donut and see someone back there that will stand by your side. A few notes. Several times you'll be asked to stand and in honor of what's happening or in honor of the person that is speaking. I would ask that, men, if you're wearing a cap, please to remove it in honor. Also, if you'd take just a moment now and put your cell phones on silent, it would be appreciated. I would like to invite Father Richard Martindale of St. Paul's Episcopal Church to give us our invocation.
Thank you, Colonel Smith. Let's pray. O Judge of the nations, we remember before you with grateful hearts the devotion and courage of your servant, Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, and all the men and women of our country who in the day of decision brought their best gifts to times of need and ventured all for the liberties we now enjoy. We hold before you those whose memories we cherish, those who still live and work and pray among us today, and those whose names and whose sufferings and whose triumphs we will never know, who on our behalf entered into danger, endured separation, labored long and bore hardship and suffering in war and in peace. We commend, O Lord, to your gracious care in keeping all the men and women of our armed forces today, at home and abroad. Defend them day by day with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials and temptations. Give them courage to face the perils which beset them, and grant them a sense of your abiding presence wherever they may be. And finally, Father of all humankind, give to us, your people, grateful hearts and a united will to honor always such faithful and courageous servants of our nation, and to hold them always in our prayers and in your love. Help us to lift our eyes above the tumult of this broken world, and grant us the grace to pray even for those who wish us harm. All which we ask until your world is perfect in peace through your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Father Martindale. At this time, we'll have the presentation of the United States colors. They will be presented by the Henderson County High School JROTC Color Guard. I ask you to stand while the Kentucky Wesleyan Brass Quintet plays the national anthem. Please remain standing after the national anthem for the Pledge of Allegiance, and remain standing until the colors have left the area. I would like to ask Mr. Manning Kimmel to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Colors.
Hey. Forward. Colors. Forward. Orange.
You may be seated. Thank you, Henderson County ROTC, the Kentucky Wesleyan Quintet, and Mr. Manning Kimmel. I would now ask that Mr. Ken Christopher, who is the president of the Henderson War Memorial, to come forward.
Thank you, Colonel Smith. I am not going to speak to you today about this ceremony. I think it rather speaks for itself. But we are so honored that you are here, that you've joined us to mark this day, this event, and to bring Admiral Husband Kimmel home to Henderson. So thank you so much for coming. I would like to recognize just a few people, if I might. First of all, the members of the Henderson War Memorial Foundation Board of Directors. These folks have worked tirelessly to see that this event has come to fruition today. It's been a long project, an arduous project, about 2.5 years, but it's here and we are so pleased. I would like for them to stand if they are here, and then I would like for you to recognize them. But would you hold your applause until we have everybody standing? First of all, Mr. Jim Hanley. Jimmy's way in the back. Here he is. Mr. Mike Neal. Mr. Ed Brimmer. Mr. Charlie Crabtree. Mr. Tom Davis. Mr. Darrell Littrell. Dr. Mark Motes. Mike Royster. Colonel Jim Smith. And our President Emeritus, Mr. James E. Snoz Davis. Man, Snoz. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I had hoped to be able to introduce the sculptor of our statue today, Raymond Groff. I'm not sure that Raymond made it back down this morning from Louisville, but he sends his best wishes. And I know that when we unveil the statue, you're going to see the work that he has put into this project. And it's absolutely gorgeous. You're going to be very, very impressed with the work he did researching the statue to make sure that everything on it was historically accurate. Raymond Groff is also the person who, around Henderson, most of you may know him if you're from here. He's done all of the Audubon bird statues around town. And just over my left shoulder, if you'll look, you'll see John James Audubon himself in Audubon Mill Park. Raymond is also the sculptor of that statue and piece of art. So if you would, give Raymond Groff a hand. Finally, I would like to recognize and make most welcome all of the members of Admiral Husband Kimmel's family. Would you all please stand and be recognized? Thank you for being here, for taking the trouble and the time to be here. And we hope this day is as important to you as it is to us. Thank you for coming. Colonel Jim? Forgot my own program. I would like to now, if you would, please welcome the mayor of the city of Henderson, Kentucky, Mayor Steve Austin.
Thank you for being here today. What a great gathering we have, and it's not a bad day, is it? Not a bad day at all. I want to welcome all of our local citizens who are here today and just contribute so much to our community and participate so much in all of the things that we do. Thank you for being here. And for all of our out-of-town visitors, welcome to Henderson. We're glad you're here, and we want you to come back and visit us again sometime. We're always happy to see you. And to the family of Admiral Kimmel, welcome, and we appreciate you being here to celebrate this day with us. We today will honor one of Henderson's highest ranking members of military service with a special riverfront memorial. And that is going to be exciting in itself, but it didn't happen without a lot of folks and a lot of participation. And that includes the Henderson War Memorial Foundation that you just met, the City of Henderson and Henderson County Fiscal Court, who partner on many, many things to make our community the best it can be, and all of the others who participate in the effort to honor Admiral Kimmel's service to our nation. Again, welcome. We're glad you're here, and enjoy your stay in Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor Austin. I would also now like for you to please welcome Henderson County Judge Executive Brad Schneider.
Hi, and again, welcome to Henderson County. It's a great day, and I especially welcome members of the Kimmel family who are with us today. A couple years ago, we inducted Admiral Kimmel into the Henderson County Alumni Hall of Fame, and I got to meet some of you at that time, and it's quite a thrill for me, and we're glad to have you back. For those of you who, members of the family and others who do not live here, we always hope you consider Henderson County your second home, because this is the place where we perhaps most honor and respect the legacy of your forebear, Admiral Kimmel, and hold the entirety of his naval career in highest respect, including his rank. And I would say that if there are members, short-sighted members of the Department of Navy who don't feel the same way, then it's kind of, to me, that's kind of like whoever the starting point guard is for Indiana University. We don't care and it doesn't matter. We're going to win eventually. That's the way I see it. On behalf of Henderson County Fiscal Court, we're glad you're with us today. We're proud to participate. We commend the members of the War Memorial Foundation, and thank you for involving all of us.
Thanks, Ken. Mayor Steve Austin, Judge Executive Brad Snyder. There's a book named or titled A Matter of Honor, Pearl Harbor, Betrayal, Blame, and a Family's Quest for Justice. It's written by Anthony Summers and Robin Swan, and it was copyrighted this year, 2016. A Matter of Honor is a heartbreaking human story of politics and war, an epic history. The authors flew in here yesterday from Ireland to be here for this dedication. I want to invite the married investigative team of Summers and Swan to the podium for a few words. Mr. Mayor, Your Honor, you stay with me, Doctor. Just in case I can't.
Stand behind him.
No.
Just in case I can't turn the page, I'm all by myself. Mr. Mayor, Your Honor, Father Martindale, and members of the extended Kimmel family who are here in legions, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for us as guests from very far away to be asked to speak on this occasion that belongs to you, as you honor a very illustrious son of Henderson, and this just days before you and Americans worldwide remember the men and some women and children who died in the ferocious Japanese onslaught on Pearl Harbor 75 years ago. I think you need a word of explanation as to how I, an author from Ireland, and my American co-author and wife, Robin Swan, come to be here. We write non-fiction books, usually on world figures or great events around whom controversy swirls. And our most recent book on an American topic was on the 9/11 attacks and how it came to pass that for all America's vast intelligence apparatus, America was caught with its guard down. What jumped us from that great modern tragedy to Pearl Harbor, the only other event in US history comparable to 9/11, when an enemy violated American territory, took more than 2,000 American lives, and jolted the nation into war? It was chance, pure chance. We were interviewing a former senior FBI agent about something obscure on an unrelated subject, and at the end of the conversation he said very courteously that he was rather disappointed, that he'd rather hoped that we were calling about something else, his grandfather and Pearl Harbor. Chance. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether to believe in chance had brought us to Tom Kimmel Jr., a grandson of the illustrious Admiral, who is at the forefront of his family's fight to defend their forebears' honor. They're the fighting Kimmel. By the count at breakfast today, 42 of them have come here this morning. They've come from California, they come from Florida, Wyoming, they've come from all over, including one serving naval officer who's come here from Guantanamo, just to be where the family is continuing its fight. And so things come full circle. History, which we think of as dealing with what happened then, is always somehow linked to what's happening now. Our interest once sparked, and working totally independently of the Kimmel family, my co-author Robin and I plunged into the intricacies of the Pearl Harbor story, a saga that, as it happens, began in one sense just 4 blocks from here, 134 years ago, when a baby boy named Husband Edward Kimmel was born to Marius, a coal mine superintendent, and his wife Sabella. Husband, most people mercifully soon came to call him Hubby or Kim, grew up, he was one of 7 kids, in a rambling house on Green Street. Boyhood was idyllic in the Henderson of the late 19th century. I saw that countryside this morning. Horseback riding, boating on the Ohio, and hunting. At school, it was clear early on that Hubby was special. He had grades averaging 97% at the age of 9, and at 17 he was valedictorian of his class. Where was life going to take him? His was a family with a military tradition dating back to the War of Independence, the Civil War, and skirmishes with the Comanches. Hubby was expected to follow in his father's footsteps and go to West Point, but it wasn't to be. The waiting list was too long. Instead, at 18, and though he had no early dreams of being a Navy man, indeed, as a little boy, as a teenager, his skiff had overturned in the Ohio here and he'd had to be rescued, he went to Annapolis. Future admirals who attended the Naval Academy around the time that Kimmel did include names that still resonate for their exploits in the Pacific: Nimitz, Halsey, Spruance, Kincaid. Hubby married a sister of the victor of Leyte Gulf. No time here to tell you about Kimmel's rise and rise. Suffice it to say that by early 1941, President Roosevelt praised him as, quote, one of the greatest naval strategists of our time. That was when FDR appointed him over 47 more senior officers to be Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and titular Commander-in-Chief of the entire U.S. seagoing fleet worldwide. It was 11 months later, in December, that the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor. It was an attack that not only sunk ships and took the lives of so many of Admiral Kimmel's men, but when the politicians and the top brass in Washington got to tell Americans what had supposedly happened, destroyed his own shining career. More than 50 years of painstaking effort would pass before, in the year 2000, and almost unnoticed, both houses of Congress agreed that Admiral Kimmel's good name had been stolen from him, and though he is long dead, should be restored. The writer Ernest Hemingway, who knew a thing or two about war, wrote that a government which wants to keep the confidence of its people should take the people into its confidence, not cover up errors to save the men who make them. That is what Washington did do in the case of Admiral Kimmel and Pearl Harbor. With our book, we've sought to bring the truth to the American public, calling the case a matter of honor, which indeed for him it was. In a while, the Admiral's grandson Tom will tell us more about the family's long struggle to right the wrong that was done to the Admiral. Then, with the unveiling of the statue that your generosity has built, Henderson itself will have struck a blow for truth in history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony Summers and Robin Swan. For those of you that are interested, you can find copies of their book, A Matter of Honor, in our USO tent back there. Our next speaker is a commander in the United States Navy, is a native of Indianapolis, Indiana. He graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1991. In July 1993, the commander was assigned to the milestones of VA 196, the Navy's last A6E squadron. During his tour, he completed one deployment to the Persian Gulf aboard the USS Carl Vinson and flew missions in support of Operation Southern Watch and Desert Strike. The commander has been deployed to the Gulf several times and served on several aircraft carriers. He graduated Top Gun from the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center. He retired in 2014 after accumulating more than 3,500 hours of flight and 850 carrier landings. Highly decorated, he currently lives with his family in Cabin John, Maryland. A more complete bio is located in your program. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain William Keith Kimmel.
Well, Judge, I think Indiana point guard starting last name is Blackman. And you should have cared last March. Something tells me I'm not going to make it back across the bridge. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. As Jim said, my name is Keith Kimmel, and I think this is a wonderful occasion to honor yet another Henderson, Kentucky hero. A naval leader of impeccable character and attention to detail, a patriot who continued his father's legacy of service, albeit in the more important service, the naval service, a man of conviction who fought in the First World War and helped lay the Navy's foundation for victory at sea in the Second, Admiral Husband E. Kimmel. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the Henderson County War Memorial Foundation and the people of Henderson, Kentucky for all their hard work and donations to make today's commemoration service possible. This is really a beautiful ceremony. I would like to specifically thank Stevie Ray for his personal and professional efforts in supporting not only the great state of Kentucky, but also the active duty dependents from not only Kentucky, but also those stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I'm still rather mystified how we came to meet, and wouldn't be surprised if we ran into each other in Havana sometime later this month. But you truly are a full service provider for both the living and beyond. I'd also like to thank Ken Christopher, the Kimmel Project Chairman and Henderson War Memorial Foundation Board member, in addition to the members of their team for dedicated personal efforts and personal time spent in spearheading this project from idea to reality. It is only fitting today, as we sit on the cusp of the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, that we should reflect upon the history and accomplishments of all those who, in less than 40 years, led the United States Navy from sail and ironclad to the greatest seaborne fighting force known to mankind. In these times, it is specifically poignant to consider how in a single generation, America grew from a divided post-Civil War to a united nation that became the light that saved the free world from despotic tyranny. So after accepting the invitation to speak here today, and being a Hoosier, I decided it might be smart just to maybe understand what the lay of the land is if I was going to cross the Mason-Dixon line. After all, it was Henderson's own General Stovepipe Johnson that led the first raids across the Ohio, attacking Newburgh, Indiana, making it the first town north of the Mason-Dixon line to be captured by Confederate forces in the Civil War. So, y'all are sort of okay. But in all seriousness, if you do some research, Henderson has been home to military heroes from the Civil War through today. Some examples, and I'm only going to hit the wave tops here, and if I don't mention your name, please don't be offended. Nurse Mary Arvin, Kentucky's most decorated World War I veteran, who was recognized by Spain, England, and the United States for her efforts. Corporal Luther Skaggs, Medal of Honor winner, recipient for his service with the Marines in the Pacific Theater of World War II. Sergeant First Class Gary Luttrell, Medal of Honor recipient for his service with the Army in Vietnam. Private Horace L. Woody Woodring, U.S. Army, who was General Patton's personal driver. And all of the past and current Henderson War Memorial Foundation board members who collectively today, on the dais in front of you, fought from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Truly, there's something in the water here that makes you people extremely special, and that's hard for a Hoosier to say. Because I probably shouldn't say this, but Evansville doesn't have near the record. Furthermore, specific Henderson County World War II contributions include, but are not limited to, one of the leading war bond purchasing counties per capita for World War II. The area was the greatest producer of war goods per capita in the nation for World War II. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, on which the book Brandon Brothers was based, trained at nearby Camp Breckenridge. And glider training for the D-Day invasion was conducted at Camp Sturgis in nearby Sturgis, Kentucky. In summary, Henderson County has a rich tradition of national service and is clearly one of the most patriotic communities in the United States of America. You all should be very proud, not only yourself, but your history. So, I guess maybe you're wondering why I'm here. Growing up in Indianapolis, Indiana, specifically, my grandfather was a second-class dieselman who drove landing boats in Okinawa. My father was a commander in the Navy when he retired from the reserves. And I would spend most of my youth, I have very specific memories of being with my grandfather watching Victory at Sea. And you probably have to be one of the older people here to remember watching Victory at Sea. And sitting on his lap, and he wouldn't talk too much, he'd just kind of watch with me, and I'd ask questions. And it became very obvious at a young age, I understood much earlier than most that Admiral Kimmel was at Pearl Harbor. He was in charge of Pearl Harbor when the Japanese did their surprise attack. So I had a very strong understanding at a young age that Kimmel was in charge of Pearl Harbor. I understood that he bore responsibility, but I also understood, like I guess only maybe a child really can, that, wait a minute, so the Japanese did all of this, it was a day of infamy, and we're going to blame this all on two people? That doesn't really sit well if you're an 8-year-old. You understand there's something you're missing, you're not quite really sure what it is, but you just know it's wrong. It essentially was, it's ridiculous in its folly. So as I kind of do a little more research, Admiral Kimmel's father was Major Manny Marius Kimmel, as you know. He graduated with honors from West Point in class of 1857. He fought Native Americans in Texas and in western states. In 1861, he helped defend Washington, D.C. from the Confederacy after the Battle of Bull Run, and then decided after that to resign from federal service and join the Confederate Army in the same year. Following the war, he went to Mexico, worked out west, and then came back home to Henderson, Kentucky. And Admiral Kimmel was born here in February 26, 1882. He would achieve every West Point's father's dreams by graduating from the United States Naval Academy in 1904. I'm a bit tongue-in-cheek here, but if we could just back up for a second and consider about the last 6 sentences that I read. Admiral Kimmel's father graduated from West Point, fought for the North, defended Washington, D.C., fought for the South. 17 years later, he has a son. 22 years later, that son graduates from the United States Naval Academy and is commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. First generation fights for the Confederacy. Second generation fights for America in World War I. And by the outbreak of World War II is a 4-star admiral in command of the Pacific Fleet. That truly is amazing to me. And some of the comments earlier made, and I got the look from the judge again, like I was somehow responsible for the Navy not forgiving this because I was wearing the uniform. I think you do have, you cannot tell Admiral Kimmel's story without telling the story of the Navy that he dedicated his life to, the institution that they led. We need to back up and focus on all of the actions that he took prior to Pearl Harbor to fully understand the importance of his service. The professional seeds that he set, the training seeds, the seeds of honor and courage. Adversity doesn't build character. The type of adversity we were going to have to deal with after World War II didn't build character, it revealed the character. The character that was being built well prior to the draft being called in 1941. The history of the United States Navy is pretty clearly divided into 2 major periods. The Old Navy, a small but respected force of sailing ships that was also notable for innovation and the use of ironclads during the American Civil War. And the New Navy, the result of a modernization effort that began in the 1880s and made it the largest Navy in the world by the 1920s. In 1882, the U.S. Navy consisted of many outdated ship designs. Over the next decade, Congress approved building multiple modern armored cruisers and battleships, and by the start of the 20th century, had moved from the 12th place in 1870 to 5th place in terms of numbers and ships. So we're number 5 in the world when Admiral Husband E. Kimmel is commissioned as an ensign. After winning 2 major battles during the 1898 Spanish-American War, the Navy continued to build more ships, and by the end of World War I had more men and women in uniform than the Royal Navy. The Washington Naval Conference recognized the Navy as equal in capital ship size to the Royal Navy, and during the 1920s and 30s, the Navy built several aircraft carriers and battleships. We are now, at this point, the largest fighting force on the sea in the world, 16 years after the Admiral's commission as an ensign. More importantly, in 1904, it was solely the job of the Naval Academy and its graduates to train and build the professionals who would someday fight 2 world wars. Some highlights from Admiral Kimmel's career: he was the aide to Assistant Secretary of Assistant Secretary of the Navy Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1915, which kind of makes the later events seem a little odd. And then served on battleships in European waters during World War I. He had command of several ships, including the battleship New York, commanded 2 destroyer divisions and a destroyer squadron. It was during these tours Admiral Kimmel helped lay the professional and tactical foundation that the Navy would rely upon. He also held a number of important positions on flag staffs in the Navy Department and completed the senior course at the Naval War College. In 1937, he was promoted to the flag rank of Rear Admiral. In this capacity, he commanded Cruiser Division 7 on a diplomatic cruise to South America, and in 1939 became commander of Battle Group Cruises Forces Pacific. After Admiral James O. Richardson was removed as Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Fleet and Pacific Fleet in February 1941, Admiral Kimmel assumed command with the temporary rank of Admiral. 4 years to go in 1 star. Really rather remarkable. The base for the fleet had been moved from its traditional home in San Diego to Pearl Harbor in May of 1940. February 1941, Kimmel wrote to the Chief of Naval Operations, "I feel that a surprise attack, submarine, air combined, and Pearl Harbor is a possibility, and we are taking immediate practical steps to minimize the damage inflicted and to ensure that the attacking force will pay." Unfortunately, those measures would not be enough. I think as we reflect back on this 75 years later after the event, we have to admit that American forces would have fared poorly even if Admiral Kimmel had reacted differently. In a 1964 interview, Admiral Chester Nimitz, who took over as commander of the Pacific Fleet 3 weeks after the attack, concluded it was God's mercy that our fleet was in Pearl Harbor on December 7th. If Kimmel had had advance notice that the Japanese were coming, he most probably would have tried to intercept them. With the difference in speed between his battleships and the faster Japanese carriers, the former could not have come within rifle range of the enemy's flat tops. As a result, we would have lost many ships in deep water and also thousands more in lives. Instead, at Pearl Harbor, the crews were easily rescued and 6 battleships ultimately raised. Admiral Hara Tadaki summed up the Japanese result by saying, "We won a great tactical victory at Pearl Harbor and thereby lost the war." When I personally consider the career of Admiral Husband Kimmel, he's always been an admiral in my mind, and that his pre-Pearl Harbor career and that of his United active duty peers and subordinates truly laid the foundation for our eventually united victory at sea in World War II. God bless Henderson, Kentucky, and the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Combat Kimmel. The Henderson County High School Choir, under the direction of Mr. Andrew Miller, will now present America the Beautiful. Thank you, Henderson County Choir. That's our choir. I want you to know. The noted Pearl Harbor scholar, former FBI agent and eldest grandson of Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, this graduate of the United States Naval Academy comes from a family of distinguished scholars and government servants dedicated to protecting America.
He served on 3 warships during the Vietnam War, attended John Marshall Law School prior to joining the FBI in 1973, where he continued to serve his country as an agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for more than 25 years. He's investigated organized crime, served on the House Appropriations Committee investigative staff, headed the Labor Racketeering Unit at the FBI headquarters, served on the President's Council on Integrity and Efficiency, and many other FBI endeavors. Upon retiring from the FBI, he served as a consultant to the Bureau addressing major spy scandals in the FBI and the CIA. A more complete bio is located in your program. Ladies and gentlemen, our featured speaker, Thomas Kincaid Kimmel, Jr.
First of all, thank you, Henderson Choir. That was lovely. I'm very thankful that the Eternal Father follows my speech and does not precede it. I'll have trouble with that. Jim Smith, Ken Christopher, Mr. Mayor, honored guest, Henderson, thank you for your loyalty to my grandfather, Admiral Husband Kimmel, and to our family whose hometown this was.
Yay!
On the morning of December 7th, 1941, at Pearl Harbor, the Admiral watched from his headquarters as the Japanese planes roared in, bombing and strafing. He rapped out what commands could be of use, informed Washington what was happening, and as per his standing orders, saw that his ship's anti-aircraft batteries were ready and rapidly responding with anti-aircraft fire. All around him, his men were dying. More than 2,000 of them, dozens drowning in the filthy oil slick of the harbor, much of it on fire. When he himself was hit a glancing blow by a spent bullet crashing through the window, he was heard to murmur, "Would that it had killed me." In the days that followed, when all around was human suffering, the Admiral was to be seen virtually visiting every ship's crew in the harbor. His first concern at all times, before and after the disaster, was for the men under his command. Years later, when he wrote his memoir, he dedicated his book to the officers and men who fought and died at Pearl Harbor. My grandfather was the most senior officer in the seagoing Navy. President Roosevelt himself had noted his splendid record over a lifetime of faithful service to our country. Yet, in the wake of the attack, the Admiral and the head of the Army Hawaiian Command, Lieutenant General Short, were relieved of command, manipulated into retirement, and accused of dereliction of duty. They were publicly vilified. 3 years later, though, the Naval Court of Inquiry cleared my grandfather of the charge, as did a later congressional investigation. The stain of disgrace remained, however. Kimmel and Short were the only two World War II senior officers not retired at their highest held rank. Of course, rank restoration has long been the only measure that could restore the Admiral's honor. More than 25 years ago, the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association passed a resolution to that effect. 3 weeks later, a dozen admirals petitioned the president to that effect. 16 years ago, Congress formally recommended to that effect. Nothing has been done. The Survivors Association asked my father and my uncle to assist them in the effort to have the commander's rank posthumously restored. They did, and we, in our generation, continue to do so, as evidenced by this letter. This letter that Manning Kimmel, another grandson, and I sent to President Obama about 2 weeks ago. The letter, in part: Dear Mr. President, we, the undersigned grandsons of Rear Admiral Husband Kimmel, respectfully urge you to nominate to the United States Senate Rear Admiral Kimmel and Major General Short for posthumous promotion as requested by Congress. As a U.S. Senator, now Vice President, Joe Biden sponsored the resolution to restore Kimmel and Short to the 1941 ranks, backers of which included the now Secretary of State John Kerry, the late Senator Edward Kennedy, and the late Senator Strom Thurmond. There can be no statute of limitations, Biden had said in a Senate speech, for restoring honor and dignity to men who spent their lives devoted to America's service and yet were unfairly treated. When it comes to serving justice, the time must always be now. We make this letter of ours public for the first time today. Also today, on the occasion of the dedication of the statue to our distinguished forebear, we make public a press statement on behalf of our extended family. Copies are available for the media and those who want to read them for themselves. Now, in the context of the overall tragedy, I strongly suspect Admiral Kimmel himself wouldn't give a hoot about the rank restoration issue. Indeed, he would probably think it but a vainglorious exercise. He would, though, encourage to the skies our effort to get the full Pearl Harbor story to the public. Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that Admiral Kimmel and the men under his command were grossly let down by military men and political officials in Washington, D.C., on whom they had to rely. Near the end of his memoir, Admiral Kimmel wrote of these failures, "I cannot excuse those in authority in Washington, and I do not believe that thousands of mothers and fathers on that 7th day of December 1941 will excuse them. We are still pursuing the truth he sought. My grandfather's own grievances aside, he remained always preoccupied with the loss of his men. A loss that perhaps could have been avoided. In a note to himself after Pearl Harbor, he wrote, "The officers and men stationed in Hawaii in 1941 were fine, upstanding young Americans, whom the American people should ever remember with gratitude and honor. In the Japanese attack, they showed themselves fearless, resourceful, and self-sacrificing. I shall be proud always of having commanded such men." Thank you again, Henderson, for the opportunity to speak on this solemn 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and for the honor you have done my grandfather. Our family is deeply grateful.
Thank you, Agent Kimmel. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ken Christopher, President of the Henderson War Memorial Foundation.
Thank you very much to Tom Kimmel for his moving remarks. I would ask now that Tom and Manning Kimmel join me along with Teddy and Ned and step over, please, to the statues with me.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's a hell of a lot. I was your granddaddy's mailman. Don't feel home place. Yes, son, now you listen to me. He was letting me talk. Yeah, he was my buddy.
This is nice day. She was. Tom, yeah. That's too much. No, in Henderson.
I was his mail carrier.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right there on homestead over there.
All right. Please be seated. This statue is a historical marker honoring our native son, Admiral Husband Kimmel, that will stand for all time. And isn't it wonderful that it's also a pretty piece of art? It marks a historical spot in the history of the city of Henderson and for the Kimmel family. And we are proud to have it here on our waterfront. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please stand again. I'd like to direct your attention to the riverfront for the laying of the wreath upon the water to honor all those who gave their lives at Pearl Harbor and throughout the Second War, while the Henderson County High School sings Eternal Father, the Navy Hymn.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Father Martindale will offer our benediction.
Once again, let us pray. Almighty God, you have given us this good land for our heritage. We humbly pray that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of your favor and glad to do your will. Bless this land always with honorable industry, sound learning, and graceful spirit. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our freedom, we pray, and fashion into one people the multitudes brought here out of many lands and tongues, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to your law we may show forth your praise among the nations of the world. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Once again, on behalf of the Henderson War Memorial Foundation, I'd like to express our gratitude for your attendance today. The big thank you to the American Legion Honor Guard for the 21-gun salute, and thanks to Zoe Flores and Dylan Johnson of the high school and middle school band for the playing of taps. And thank you, choir. Don't forget to visit our USO tent. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kentucky Wesleyan Brass Quintet as well.
Well, what you think of it, Dave?
Fantastic program. Very, very nice.
Hey, Debbie.
Yeah. It's so cold. Oh, it's staring at you.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
I know.
Now I gotta get ready for the black night.
Okay.
And the court and fire department.
Linda. More time. Good.
Well, I was afraid that, yes, I really did. Start documenting for purposes.
No.
Facebook and write about everything else.
The people who thought about it did. I would say
All right, good to see you. Oh, sure. Mr. Kimmel. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll get him. Oh, he's right there. See, they Also, we kind of left that to the family. If they didn't want to do it, we didn't want to do it. But the bricks also. I know. That'll come later. That'll come later. I'm thanking you so much.
Glad to be a part of it. Me too.
Oh, there's the ring. Move on.
Well,
A few visitors down here.
whatever screws up, whatever.
That's right, your brother gave me a huge tutorial too, and I promised you this about these pictures.
Yes, we've been standing in the rain.
But I hope they set aside. Cummings on the board too.
I don't know what's on that. I think Kimmel will be big friend.
I think.
I've seen cheers.